International travel is a popular pursuit for Canadians, but the geopolitical landscape can sometimes make certain destinations challenging or unwelcoming. Due to a range of political, diplomatic, and cultural issues, some countries are less receptive to Canadian travelers, with potential restrictions, legal complications, or strained diplomatic ties. In 2025, Canadians may face unwelcome conditions in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and more due to political tensions, security concerns, and human rights issues. Here's an in-depth look at the factors making these countries challenging destinations for Canadians. So, here's the list of 10 countries where Canadians are not welcome in 2025. Before we start, make sure you subscribe to the channel and comment your thought. Here we go. Number 1. Saudi Arabia. Diplomatic relations and visa policies. Saudi Arabia has become a significant destination for business, religious tourism, and cultural tourism due to events such as the Hajj pilgrimage and the development of tourism projects. However, its relationship with Canada has been strained since 2018, when Canada raised human rights concerns regarding Saudi Arabia's treatment of political dissidents. The Saudi government responded by expelling the Canadian ambassador, halting trade, and freezing investment. As of 2025, while some diplomatic ties have been restored, the relationship remains cautious, affecting the ease with which Canadians can enter Saudi Arabia. Restrictions and concerns for Canadian travelers. Canadian travelers to Saudi Arabia are subject to strict entry requirements and must respect Saudi Arabia's conservative cultural norms. Although e-visas and tourist visas are available, Canadian travelers may encounter restrictions or heightened scrutiny. Canadians who voice concerns on social media or discuss Saudi human rights issues openly could be at risk of arrest or detention upon arrival. Human rights concerns. Travelers, including Canadians, should be mindful of Saudi Arabia's strict laws regarding public behavior, dress code, and political expression. Same-sex relationships, for example, are illegal and can result in severe penalties, including imprisonment. Women travelers face specific restrictions on dress and may encounter barriers in public spaces. Canadians should also exercise caution in discussing Saudi policies publicly, as the government monitors political discourse and is intolerant of dissent. Number 2. Iran. Political tensions and diplomatic barriers. Iran-Canada relations have been strained for over a decade. Canada suspended diplomatic relations with Iran in 2012, and the situation worsened after the downing of Ukraine International Airlines Flight PS-752 in 2020, which killed many Canadians. Canada has since pushed for international accountability, which has complicated relations. Although some discussions on reopening diplomatic channels have taken place, as of 2025, there remains no Canadian embassy in Iran, and limited consular support is available for Canadians who might encounter difficulties. Travel warnings and risks. Iran has stringent visa requirements, and Canadians often experience delays or rejections in obtaining visas. Once in Iran, travelers must be careful about the content of their conversations and avoid engaging in political discussions. Foreigners may be monitored, and Canadian citizens, especially those with dual Iranian citizenship, face a risk of arbitrary detention. Cultural and legal restrictions. Iran has conservative cultural practices rooted in Islamic law, which restricts certain behaviors. Public displays of affection, same-sex relationships, and Western-style clothing for women are prohibited. Canadians should also be aware of Iran's strict laws against alcohol consumption. Violating these cultural and legal norms can result in serious consequences, including fines, imprisonment, or deportation. Number 3. Egypt. Strained diplomatic relations. While Canada and Egypt maintain diplomatic relations, the Egyptian government has periodically shown a less welcoming stance toward Westerners, particularly journalists, activists, and anyone perceived to criticize the government. Since President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi took power in 2014, Egypt has clamped down on dissent, resulting in numerous cases of foreign nationals facing arrest for politically sensitive activities. Canadians intending to visit Egypt should exercise extreme caution, especially if they plan to report on or discuss political matters. Safety and surveillance concerns. Canadian travelers may experience heightened surveillance and scrutiny from Egyptian authorities, especially in areas near protests, government buildings, or politically sensitive sites. Canadians of Egyptian descent may also encounter extra scrutiny at entry points. Egyptian authorities have been known to monitor social media, and any post deemed critical of the government could potentially lead to detention. Human rights and freedom of expression issues. Egypt enforces strict controls on freedom of expression, particularly around the topics of government policies, political dissent, and religious views. Canadians visiting the country must also respect local customs, which include conservative dress codes and restricted behavior in public spaces. Egypt's treatment of political prisoners and journalists raises additional concerns, with reports of arbitrary detention, harsh conditions in detention centers, and lack of fair trials. Number 4. India. Diplomatic tensions and entry restrictions. Canada and India have a historically strong relationship, but recent tensions have surfaced, particularly over political issues involving the Sikh diaspora in Canada. In 2023, diplomatic relations soured over allegations from Canada regarding India's involvement in the assassination of a Canadian Sikh activist. The situation escalated, with both countries expelling diplomats and imposing travel advisories. By 2025, while diplomatic channels remain open, relations are tenuous, and Canadians traveling to India face increased scrutiny. Potential visa complications. India may impose restrictions or delays on visa applications for Canadians. Canadians of Indian descent or those associated with Sikh activism may face particular challenges, including longer visa processing times or potential rejections. In some cases, Indian authorities have denied entry to Canadians with known affiliations to Sikh separatist movements or those who have openly criticized the Indian government. Political sensitivities and security concerns. India has a complex political landscape, and Canadians are advised to avoid participating in or discussing political issues, particularly those involving religious or ethnic minorities. Canadians are also advised to exercise caution in regions with political unrest, such as Jammu and Kashmir, where entry is restricted and tensions are high. Additionally, anti-government or anti-national discourse on social media could lead to complications, as the Indian government monitors online activities and may restrict entry to individuals who have criticized its policies. Number 5. Venezuela. Political instability and diplomatic isolation. Venezuela has faced significant political and economic crises over the past decade, with hyperinflation, shortages of basic goods, and widespread poverty. Canada's decision to impose sanctions on Venezuela due to human rights abuses under President Nicolas Maduro's regime has damaged diplomatic relations. Canada does not recognize Maduro's government and has supported opposition leaders, further complicating relations. This tension makes Venezuela unwelcoming to Canadians, with limited consular support available in case of emergency. Visa and entry barriers. Venezuelan authorities have been known to detain or delay entry for foreigners, especially those from countries critical of its government, including Canada. Entry restrictions, lengthy visa processes, or even outright bans are possible for Canadians, particularly those who work in journalism or human rights advocacy. Safety concerns and political risks. Venezuela's crime rate is one of the highest in the world, with frequent reports of kidnappings, armed robberies, and assaults. Canadians visiting Venezuela face risks of both crime and government surveillance, as foreign nationals may be monitored by authorities who are suspicious of potential political agendas. The unstable political situation, combined with severe economic challenges, makes Venezuela a highly challenging destination for Canadians. Number 6. Turkey. Diplomatic tensions and political differences. Turkey and Canada share NATO membership and trade ties, but political and diplomatic differences have strained their relationship over the years. Turkey's increased authoritarian stance under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has drawn criticism globally, including from Canada, which has voiced concerns about human rights abuses and press freedom in Turkey. Canada's condemnation of Turkey's military actions in Syria and its stance on Turkish policies toward Kurdish populations has further complicated the relationship. Security and surveillance concerns. For Canadians, particularly journalists, academics, or anyone perceived as being critical of the Turkish government, there are risks of surveillance and detainment. Turkey enforces strict controls on freedom of expression, and foreign nationals critical of government policies or seen as sympathetic to Kurdish groups may face interrogation or deportation. Canadians should be cautious when discussing sensitive political topics and avoid social media posts that could be viewed as anti-government. Human rights and legal restrictions. Turkey has rigid laws around public protests and political expression, and foreign visitors engaging in such activities face serious consequences, including detention. Canadian citizens who wish to travel to Turkey should avoid involvement in political events and be aware of the stringent surveillance laws. In recent years, several foreign nationals, including Canadians, have been detained under broad anti-terrorism laws, which classify criticism of the government as terrorist propaganda. Number 7. Russia. Deteriorating diplomatic relations and sanctions. Canada and Russia have experienced strained relations for nearly a decade, primarily due to Canada's support of Ukraine and its criticism of Russian actions in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. Since the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, Canada imposed a series of sanctions on Russian entities and individuals, and in response, Russia declared Canada an unfriendly country. The result has been reduced diplomatic interaction and a hostile environment for Canadians in Russia. Increased visa and entry restrictions. Russians view Canada's role in the international sanctions as unfriendly, leading to possible visa restrictions and increased scrutiny for Canadians entering Russia. As of 2025, Canadians may encounter delays in obtaining visas or may even be denied entry altogether, especially those with any connections to government, journalism, or advocacy. Safety concerns and surveillance. For Canadians in Russia, safety concerns include potential surveillance and detention. Canadian citizens perceived as critical of Russian policies, particularly those connected to human rights or media, may be monitored or subjected to harassment. Canadians traveling to Russia should avoid political discussions, limit contact with local journalists or activists, and exercise caution with online communications to avoid attracting attention from Russian authorities. Number 8. North Korea. Minimal diplomatic relations. North Korea's closed-off and secretive nature makes it one of the least accessible destinations for Canadians. While Canada and North Korea technically maintain diplomatic relations, there are no Canadian diplomatic missions within North Korea, and interactions are limited. Travel to North Korea is tightly controlled, with all tourists required to be part of government-approved tours. Independent travel is not permitted, and Canadians must adhere to strict guidelines, constantly monitored by North Korean guides. Risks of detention and arrest. North Korea's legal system is known for being arbitrary and harsh, with strict punishments for actions that would be considered benign elsewhere. Canadians face severe consequences for actions such as disrespecting the North Korean leadership, photographing restricted areas, or attempting to engage with locals without permission. Even minor infractions, such as accidentally damaging state materials, can lead to lengthy prison sentences, hard labor, or deportation. Limited consular support and safety risks. In the event of arrest or detention, Canadians would have limited access to consular assistance, as Canada does not have an embassy in North Korea. Canadian citizens should be acutely aware of the restricted freedoms in North Korea and adhere strictly to their tour guide's instructions to avoid legal complications. Travelers should also be aware of the broader risk to health and safety due to limited medical facilities and strict restrictions on movement. Number 9. Cuba. Diplomatic relations with underlying strains. Canada has historically had strong diplomatic and economic relations with Cuba, which distinguishes Canada from many Western countries. However, the situation has become more complex over recent years, particularly with new concerns around the U.S., Canada alliance and political views on Cuba's governance. Despite positive relations, Canadian travelers have recently encountered challenges, including issues with obtaining medical care, restrictions on movement, and detainment under vague charges. Medical and health concerns. Since the 2017 Havana Syndrome incidents affecting Canadian and American diplomats in Cuba, concerns about the safety and health of Canadians in Cuba have grown. Several cases of unexplained symptoms among Canadian diplomats led to staff reductions at the embassy in Havana. While no definitive explanation for these symptoms has been identified, the Canadian government has advised caution for Canadians, particularly those with pre-existing health conditions or heightened sensitivity to environmental factors. Legal restrictions and risk of detainment. Cuba has strict laws, and Canadians could face legal consequences for seemingly minor infractions. Cases of Canadians detained over issues with currency, minor disputes, or misunderstandings with Cuban law enforcement have surfaced. Canadian visitors should exercise caution in public behavior and ensure they follow local laws to avoid issues with Cuban authorities. The Canadian Embassy offers limited assistance for Canadians detained in Cuba, so adherence to local norms is critical for a safe visit. Number 10. China. Tense diplomatic relations and consular challenges. Canada and China have had a tumultuous relationship in recent years, affected by political disputes, trade conflicts, and the high-profile detentions of Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. These arrests, widely seen as retaliation for Canada's detention of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, cast a shadow on China-Canada relations. While the immediate issues surrounding these cases have been resolved, the relationship remains delicate, and Canada has expressed concerns over human rights issues in China, including those in Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Tibet. Entry restrictions and increased scrutiny. Canadian travelers in 2025 face an unpredictable environment in China, where diplomatic tensions have led to increased scrutiny of Western visitors. Canadians could encounter delays or denials in visa processing, and those who work in media, academia, or government-related roles may face heightened inspection and monitoring during their stay. China has also enacted new security and privacy laws, which can affect foreigners, particularly those who openly criticize the Chinese government or have affiliations with sensitive topics. Risk of surveillance and detainment. China's extensive surveillance apparatus, known for monitoring both citizens and foreigners, poses a risk to Canadians in China. Visitors should avoid discussing political topics or sharing opinions about Chinese policies, particularly in public or online spaces. The government's zero-tolerance stance on political dissent has led to detentions of foreign nationals who engage in activities deemed subversive. Canadians who visit China are advised to limit social media activity, avoid political discussions, and be mindful of the country's strict internet censorship. Number 11. Belarus. Political tensions and diplomatic challenges. Relations between Canada and Belarus have deteriorated significantly over the past few years, particularly since Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's disputed re-election in 2020, which led to widespread protests, human rights violations, and accusations of election fraud. Canada, along with other Western nations, condemned the elections, imposed sanctions on Belarusian officials, and supported Belarusian opposition figures. In response, Belarus has shown hostility toward Western visitors, including Canadians, leading to heightened security checks and potential visa complications. Visa restrictions and entry barriers. As of 2025, Belarus has increased scrutiny for foreign visitors from countries like Canada that have imposed sanctions or supported opposition to the Belarusian government. Canadians traveling to Belarus may experience long visa processing times, additional documentation requirements, or outright visa denials. Belarusian authorities closely monitor travelers with backgrounds in journalism, human rights, or advocacy, viewing them as potential threats to national stability. This increased scrutiny can deter Canadians from visiting, as they may face barriers simply at the point of entry. Security and surveillance risks. Belarus maintains a comprehensive surveillance apparatus, including a government security service known as the KGB, which monitors both locals and foreign visitors. Canadians who discuss political issues, attend public gatherings, or interact with opposition supporters could be at risk of surveillance or detainment. The Belarusian government has a history of detaining foreign nationals suspected of subversive activities or espionage, sometimes with little evidence. This atmosphere poses risks for Canadians visiting Belarus, as even private conversations or social media activity critical of the Belarusian government could be flagged by authorities. Canadians should avoid public displays of political opinions and ensure that social media accounts are free of content that could attract government scrutiny. Human rights violations and legal risks. Belarus has faced widespread criticism for human rights abuses, especially since the 2020 protests. Arrests, harsh prison conditions, and lack of due process have been widely documented, raising concerns for the safety of foreign nationals, including Canadians. Recent crackdowns on foreign media and NGOs have also raised the stakes, with the Belarusian government perceiving Western countries, including Canada, as adversaries attempting to destabilize the regime. Canadian visitors should exercise extreme caution in their behavior, especially around politically sensitive topics. Activities that might seem harmless elsewhere, such as photographing public buildings, asking questions about political topics, or meeting with local activists, can result in fines, detentions, or even deportation. Travel advisories and precautions. Given the risks, the Canadian government has issued travel advisories warning citizens about the dangers of visiting Belarus. Travelers are encouraged to keep a low profile, stay in well-known areas, avoid protests or political events, and refrain from discussing political matters with locals or on social media. If Canadians decide to visit Belarus, they should also have emergency contact information for nearby Canadian embassies, such as in neighboring countries, since there is no Canadian embassy in Belarus, to seek assistance in case of an emergency. Number 12. South Sudan. Political instability and civil conflict. Since gaining independence from Sudan in 2011, South Sudan has struggled with internal conflicts, economic challenges, and political instability. Despite various peace agreements, including a recent peace deal aimed at unifying warring factions, South Sudan remains one of the world's most volatile countries. Tensions between ethnic groups and political factions regularly lead to violent confrontations, making it a dangerous environment for foreign travelers, including Canadians. The lack of a robust governmental structure has also created lawlessness in many regions. Canadians traveling to South Sudan face significant risks from armed conflict, militia attacks, and tribal violence, particularly in rural areas. The threat of violence in urban areas, including the capital, Juba, adds to the potential dangers. As of 2025, Canadians are strongly advised against traveling to South Sudan due to these high security risks. Security risks and limited infrastructure. South Sudan has limited infrastructure to support a safe experience for international travelers. There are few paved roads, limited medical facilities, and an unreliable police force, making it challenging to address emergencies or secure transportation. Canadians visiting South Sudan would likely encounter difficulties in accessing health care, clean water, and safe accommodations. Moreover, the government lacks the capacity to provide adequate protection for foreign visitors, which increases the likelihood of security incidents. In recent years, Canadians in South Sudan have faced incidents such as armed robberies, vehicle ambushes, and violent crime. Foreigners are often targeted for kidnapping and extortion, as they are perceived as having valuable resources. In areas outside of Cuba, travelers encounter even greater risks due to the presence of armed groups operating independently of the central government. Consular support limitations. South Sudan lacks a Canadian embassy, so any Canadians encountering issues must rely on the Canadian embassy in a neighboring country, such as Kenya or Uganda, for support. In the event of detainment or a serious emergency, obtaining prompt consular assistance is challenging, making it difficult for Canadians to receive the necessary support in times of need. The lack of in-country support further complicates travel for Canadians, who may have limited avenues for protection and assistance if they encounter legal or medical emergencies. Human rights concerns and freedom of movement. South Sudan's volatile political environment has led to severe human rights abuses, including unlawful detentions, torture, and restrictions on freedom of movement. Security checkpoints are prevalent, particularly in areas of ongoing conflict, and foreign nationals are often required to produce extensive documentation, including permits for travel to certain regions. Canadians may experience harassment or intimidation at these checkpoints, where soldiers or local officials may impose fines or demand bribes. In addition to movement restrictions, Canadians should be aware of cultural norms and legal restrictions in South Sudan. For example, certain attire or behaviors perceived as disrespectful to local customs could lead to tensions with local communities. Canadians are advised to follow local customs closely and avoid actions that might be misinterpreted as disrespectful. Health risks and limited medical facilities. South Sudan's healthcare infrastructure remains underdeveloped, with few hospitals, limited medical supplies, and inadequate facilities for serious medical conditions. Canadians traveling to South Sudan face health risks from diseases such as malaria, cholera, and COVID-19, as well as from lack of access to routine medical care. Many areas lack clean water, adequate sanitation, and access to emergency medical services, increasing the health risks for foreign visitors. Canadian travelers should ensure that they have comprehensive medical and evacuation insurance if they choose to visit South Sudan. This coverage is essential, as any serious health emergency would likely require medical evacuation to a neighboring country. Vaccinations and preventive measures against diseases endemic to the region are also critical for Canadians traveling to South Sudan. Conclusion. So, guys, this was the 10 countries where Canadians are not welcome in 2025. Hope you will like it and appreciate it. While each of these countries offers unique cultural and historical experiences, Canadians may face significant challenges when visiting Turkey, Russia, North Korea, Cuba, and China in 2025. With diplomatic tensions, restrictive policies, and heightened surveillance, Canadians are advised to exercise caution, follow local laws meticulously, and avoid any behavior that could attract attention or scrutiny. Given the unpredictable diplomatic landscape, it is also essential for Canadians to stay updated on travel advisories issued by the Canadian government and to consider alternatives if travel risks outweigh the benefits. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and press the bell icons for latest upcoming travel videos. Bye-bye. See you.